You think it's over just because I'm dead? It's not over. The games have just begun.
Saw 4 represents a shift in gear for the Saw franchise. After the conclusive ending of Saw 3, Saw 4 had to reinvigorate the franchise with new story potential. This installment would be the first in which that there was no hand from either creator, James Wan or Leigh Whannell. While Wan was largely absent after the first Saw, you don't know what you've got till it's gone with the writing of Leigh Whannell in this series. Instead, Marcus Dunstan and Patrick Melton step in to provide a relatively flimsy script, with some pretty cheesy dialogue. At least the story being told is still fresh. Being the fourth installment of a horror franchise, it's kind of relieving that they're not just trying to tell the same escape room story over and over. Instead, putting entirely new setups in each entry. This isn't about people trying to escape a building via a series of torturous tests. It also takes more time to expand on Jigsaw's backstory, even after his death at the end of Saw 3. We've had hints of humanity from his character and why he's doing these terrible acts, but this one gives us a lot to go with. You end up feeling sorry and sad for this man because of what he's gone through. And Tobin Bell gives a great performance, as expected. When we see him work on certain traps, and most certainly when we see him watch his first test subject, he's so incredibly chilling and thrilling. Generally, I hate when movies give the creepy, evil character a tragic backstory. It always threatens to take away what makes the character scary in the first place. But Saw actually breaks that trend. Not only does Jigsaw's backstory make sense, it actually informs everything he's done in the present. At times, it does feel like the abundance of backstory feels as if it's trying to scour for anything it can in order to continue the series, sometimes grasping at straws. But after such a succinct ending in the third, I think they did the best job they could, especially for first-time writers of the series. While Saw 4 is considered by most fans of the series as where the franchise starts to go downhill, I found it to hold up better than I expected, better than I remembered. Saw 4's structure is vastly different to that of Saws 1, 2, and 3. By this point, the cop drama aspect has completely subsumed the Trap A-B plot, and this is the turning point where the Saw franchise would feel more like an ongoing film series and less of an individual film series. Returning to direct is Darren Lynn Bousman, in what would end up being his final Saw movie until Spiral, as he would shift his focus onto Repo the Genetic Opera in 2008. And it's a welcome and much needed return, as he does a great job of keeping such a massive story coherent and well paced, while giving every moment the weight it deserves. Almost everything in the movie feels the same as previous Saw movies, even though the writing is different. The atmosphere is still really dark and the tone works with the franchise, but doesn't feel nearly as grim as Saw 3. Saw 4 tackles the question that some have asked from the beginning, which is, how could one man, Jigsaw, even with the aid of his acolyte Amanda, set up so many elaborate, creative, and expensive death traps all over the city without raising suspicion? And I know, so many people hate this one, but it's also the best one because the first thing you see is Jigsaw's cock and balls. We open on a very intricate and intriguing autopsy scene of the now deceased John Kramer, having met his end at the hands of Jeff Denlin at the end of the previous film. This is up there for one of my favorite scenes in the movie, simply because of how good it looks. The special effects team deserves all the praise here. As they cut open John's stomach, they find a foreign object, and immediately call for homicide to investigate. In steps Detective Mark Hoffman, who we briefly met in Saw 3, but is mostly a nobody character to this point. The object they found is a tape, the one that we saw John cover in wax. And it's specifically for Detective Hoffman. Jigsaw will be testing them, posthumously. The games have just begun. We see our traditional cold open trap, set inside this mausoleum. A man wakes up, gasping for air. His eyes are sewn shut. He feels around him. Finding a chain links him to another man, whose mouth is sewn shut. Hey bald guy, what was your favorite horror movie from 2023? Talk to me! As the two battle for slack on their chains, they pull the pin to the machine in the middle. The man with his mouth sewn sees a padlock around his neck, and the man with his eyes sewn has the key. Personally, I think I would try and rip open the sutures as quickly as possible in order to communicate, but our friend here decides to sneak up on the much larger man, who also has a weapon, swinging it recklessly in fear. To no one's surprise, that doesn't work out for him, and he gets stabbed in the leg by a hook. He pulls the ultimate Uno reverse, using the hook to stab the man in the neck, grabbing the key he needs to free himself. But before he can, he must defend himself against Wave 2 of the boss, doing so with a really slick high kick that would even get full marks from Ryu. He finishes him off by bludgeoning him with a hammer, finally unlocking his padlock. And then he chooses to rip his mouth open? Certainly not the order I would have done things, but I guess he's still alive, so what do I know? I do know that in this series, seeing the SWAT team can mean nothing good. And here they are. They use this adorable little rover guy to clear the room when it comes across Detective Carey. Rig obviously isn't privy to the information we know and rushes in, even though the room hasn't fully been cleared. Hoffman reprimands Rig, who only went through because he thought she was still alive, that he could save her. Eventually, Hoffman sends Rig home, and goes to meet the FBI's finest special agents, Lindsay Perez and Peter Strom. As they inspect Carey's corpse, and the trap she remains in, they find that she was never getting out. Her game was rigged for her to die. While Hoffman explains Amanda was Jigsaw's accomplice, Strom retorts that Amanda wouldn't have been strong enough to hoist Carey up, and with John's frail, cancer-ridden body, leaves only one possibility. There's someone else that helped him. Rig returns to the station, watching a tape of Detective Hoffman interrogating somebody. Hoffman and the special agents enter the room, and Hoffman implores Rig to take his vacation time, go spend some time with his wife. It's commendable that Rig is so hell-bent on saving people, saving Carey, saving Eric Matthews. Everyone around him is dying. Rig returns home to his wife, who's on her way out the door. She's going out of town for a few days, and exhorts him to come with. He rebuffs the offer, and his wife tells him that he can't save everyone. She gives him one last kiss on the cheek before leaving. As Perez and Strom continue to research more on John Kramer, Strom seems to be interested more in why Rig was rewatching an old interrogation tape. The woman Hoffman is questioning is Jill Tuck, John Kramer's ex. Perez is concerned by what was left on Carey's message, that 2 officers might be in danger, but Strom dismisses her. Back at home, Rig struggles to sleep, the weight of his emotions keeping him up. He hears a noise from the other room and investigates, assuming it to be his wife. Instead, he is attacked by somebody in a pig mask. Hoffman puts something in a folder and puts it into a desk drawer, and as he makes a call, we see a pig mask behind him too. Rig wakes up in the bath, the shower water hitting his face. As he exits, a familiar foe infiltrates his television. Jigsaw says that he stood by as his colleagues have fallen, creating his obsession with saving everyone. Tonight, he will face that obsession. Eric Matthews is still alive, shown here struggling to avoid being hanged by standing on an ice block. Next to him sits Detective Hoffman, strapped into a chair. Matthews has 90 minutes to save himself, and Hoffman's life relies on him doing so. As Rig sweeps the rest of his house, photos of people litter the hall, hanging from the ceiling. Eventually he comes across someone in a pig mask, sitting in his living room. A light illuminates a painted message, "See what I see." Jigsaw says the woman in front of him needs help, but it's not his job to help her. Under the mask is just a victim, which Jigsaw requests he just walk away, and not save her as he is prone to do. The chair she is bound to is also a trap, as her long flowing hair is put up in a ponytail, being fed through a series of gears, slowly pulling it. As Rig hunts for a way to stop the trap, the woman tells him the combination to get her out is written on the gears. He rummages around his kitchen for something to cut her hair with, but obviously everything of use has been confiscated, so he resorts to shooting the device, which does unlock it like he hit it with an EMP, but quickly starts back up. As he slowly finds the combination, the woman's scalp begins tearing off. Before she ends up getting fully scalped like she's in Inglourious Bastards, Rig puts in the full combination, and goes to find something to help her stop the bleeding. And as soon as he leaves, the woman reaches into the TV stand and pulls out a knife that was hidden in there. Which would have been helpful before, don't you think? She attacks Rig with the knife, and he diffuses the situation by ripping more of her scalp off and then throwing her through to the next scene. Holy shit, that was so cool! Throughout the film so far, we've seen a couple really smooth transitions that really have no need to be in at all, but they're really good. And this transition was actually practical too. They built the 2 sets next to each other and then actually threw someone through the glass into the police department. It's times like this where I just love the franchise. While we're at the station, the prints from the bullet they found in Detective Carey's body came back with a match, Rig, and with the shots fired call at his address, they head on over. With the woman incapacitated, Rig finds another tape, but this one was for her. Jigsaw told her that an officer will try and save her, but take her in and charge her for her crimes. So, if he does, she must try and kill him in order to stay free. Rig throws the tape to the side, and finds a box with 2 keys. One will save a life, and one will take one. Alright, let's check in with our detectives, see how they're doing. Hoffman is gagged and bound, but at least Matthews has a nifty little walking boot for that leg that Amanda absolutely demolished. We get a flashback of the aftermath of his duel with Amanda, showing a man drag him into a room that would soon become his prison. As the SWAT team breaks into Rig's apartment, they find the blonde woman dead in his living room. They put out an APB for Rig, and find his walls plastered with pictures of people. Perez and Strom try to decipher what Jigsaw wants them to see, which includes a picture of Jill Tuck. They bring her back in for more questioning, trying to find the reason behind this new game. A man dressed in all black enters the room where the two detectives are kept, arming the door and laying his gun down. Obviously, Hoffman wants him to let him go.
You fucking hear me? You fucking motherfucker!
But it's clear that he won't with Rig's timer still counting down. Speaking of, Rig is still continuing his journey, arriving at the Alexander Motel, where one of his keys he received is from. He uses it to unlock door 261, where he finds a box and a picture of his wife. Though the box is set up to maybe look like her scalp is protruding from it, it really is just the pig mask, with a picture of a convict. Jigsaw wants Rig to feel what he feels, so he has supplied him with his greatest asset, anonymity. The pig mask throughout the series has been used to obscure the identity of Jigsaw and Amanda, and now Rig dons the mask to force the motel front desk person into the room. Armed with more evidence, and especially since it pertains directly to her, Strom and Perez return to question Jill Tuck, inquiring about the mottos 4 walls build a home and cherish your life. The latter of which is the motto of the clinic she runs, which was later adopted and twisted by John for his murderous mantra. Jill denounces John's actions, but Strom isn't quick to believe her. Everything points to Jill being his accomplice, and Strom knows that all he has to do is convince 12 jurors of her guilt. Rig forces the motel worker into the next room, a blood-red light irradiating a sea of pictures of women in peril. Rig plays his next tape, explaining that he cannot punish the man, he must face his own demons. When he sees exactly what kind of monster he is, his demeanor shifts, and forces the man into his restraints. His name is Ivan, and he must decide what's more important, his eyes which have led him astray, or his body, which has been used as an instrument to inflict pain on his victims. Rig exits the room. It's not his game. He's given Ivan the tools he needs to atone, and can only sit back and hear the pained wails from behind the door. Though he pierces one eye, Ivan inevitably fails his test, and is dismembered. Rig's next note says, "Become the teacher and save a life. Go back to where it all began." We get a flashback sequence where Rig comforts a little girl at school, asking her who gave her the bruises that cover her arms. Hoffman exits the room, leaving the door open enough to see an older man, assumed to be her father. He locks eyes with her, making sure she stays quiet. As she goes back to class, the man approaches the two officers, almost gloating that he's getting away with it. When he pats Rig on the shoulder, Rig loses it, punching him in the face, shattering his nose. Strom continues grilling Jill about John. Jill explains John's mentality shift after Gideon. Wait, who's Gideon?
Do you know anything about the Chinese zodiac?
Oh, Jill, no.
We see Jill closing up the clinic for the night, and John waits for her outside. He's accosted by a lady of the night, and keen eyes will recognize her as Addison from Saw 2. Just as Jill is about to head out, she's interrupted by Cecil, who we saw to be a bit aggressive before. But he's not here to do anything dastardly, instead he just forgot his coat. When Jill goes to return it, he brandishes a switchblade and opens the door. As he goes to run out, he slams the door on a pregnant Jill, instantly causing her to bleed. Though Cecil is concerned for Jill, he's more concerned by his freedom, and he runs out of the clinic, right past John. John runs in and finds her, carrying her to the emergency room. But it's too late. Jill loses the baby. All she wanted to do was help people. John remarks that she can't help them. They have to help themselves. Okay, so let's catch up if you got lost.
Girl loves boy, boy loves girl. Boy gets girl pregnant, girl loses baby. Boy turns into a serial killer. Jill.
Yeah, pretty much, actually.
I'm not buying it.
Look, Strom, I don't know what to tell you. Just go find Rig. Ah, you just missed him. But they did find Ivan, or what's left of him. The room that ended up being his tomb was rented out to a lawyer named Art Blank, and he's been missing for a couple weeks now. That's now 2 out of 5 people that were on Rig's walls dead. Perez correctly affirms that Rig didn't kill Ivan. Ivan did this to himself. That's the whole Jigsaw mantra. Strom repudiates the claim, saying this wasn't Ivan's game. He maintains that Rig is being recruited by Jigsaw. When the special agents and SWAT team inspect Art Blank's last known location, they find a CCTV camera. They are the 2 Jigsaw targets, not Matthews and Hoffman. Matthews has had enough of this, and steps off the block to hang himself. The man watching over him sets him back on the block of ice, saying that if he dies, Hoffman dies too, as the melted ice would electrocute him. Hoffman begs Matthews to listen to him, and as Hoffman locks eyes with the man, he recognizes him. He's met him before. It's Art Blank. He represented the nasty man that Rig punched, and Hoffman backed his colleague, willing to commit perjury for him. Maybe that's why Rig is so adamant on finding him, before it's too late. As Rig moves through the halls of the now abandoned school, he enters a classroom that has remnants of a game already complete. A man and a woman are chained back to back, with metal skewers throughout their bodies. This isn't a game for the husband. This is all for the wife to take back her life from a serial abuser. The rods piercing through her are non-lethal, but angled enough to be lethal for the husband. Rig finds the wife still trapped, but alive. Jigsaw wants him to save as he saves. He finds his next clue, a picture of his wife, telling him to go home. Only the G is in a different font, one that Rig knows all too well. As he heads to the next location, he gives the wife the key, covering her with his jacket, and pulls the alarm. This notifies the police of her whereabouts, and she tells them that Rig saved her. Perez gets a call that Art Blank had gotten all of his victims acquitted to this point. One of the police investigators dusts around for prints, accidentally setting off the crossbow-type mechanism that pierced the rods through the married couple, and this innocent crime scene photographer is impaled. The cops think that Jigsaw set this up in case they found a place, but I think the investigators should have been a bit more careful. But they do learn some information. Art Blank's other known address was co-owned by Joel Tuck, and it's the very building that they're in now. On full alert now, Perez and Strom roam the halls, coming across the next clue. In this room, Billy sits very politely, with a note on his lap and a tape player around his neck. The tape is for Agent Perez, warning her that Strom will soon take the life of an innocent man. Her next move here is critical. The message gets quiet. Only indistinct mumbles are heard. As Perez leans in to hear, the puppet was a trap, sending shrapnel into Perez's face, putting her out of commission. Perhaps Matthews' trap wasn't calculated correctly, as he's struggling to breathe, and eventually passes out. Hoffman gets the attention of Art, and as he walks over to check on him, Matthews sneaks a hit on him. He enlightens Matthews that he's not the one he should be worried about, and beseeches him to stay alive until the counter ticks down to zeros. If this other guy can pass his tests, then all three of them can go free. He arms Matthews with a gun and a bullet, as a part of his final test. Strom calls Perez's mother, to inform her of the news of her daughter, and thrashes around his office in rage. Now, without the good cop to his bad cop, he returns to Joel Tuck, who's been stuck in interrogation this whole time. He has endless questions, but isn't getting the answers. In a flashback scene, we see Jill and Art Blank visit John in his workshop, as they have some business to attend to.
Get the fuck out of here.
John is over it all. He wants all of his buildings given to Jill. Jill thinks he blamed her for losing Gideon, and their relationship never recovered after that. Soon after, he gets his diagnosis from Dr. Gordon, and survives his attempt on his life. But he returned a changed man, someone Jill couldn't recognize, but one that we as the viewer know all too well. Jill finds Cecil's pictures all over the workshop. Then we get the rare flashback within the flashback, seeing John create his first tape, and stalking Cecil through a Chinese New Year festival, the Year of the Pig. John walks up behind Cecil, chloroforming him. Cecil wakes up in a chair, with sharp metal forced through his wrists. John won't let him go. He's got so much pent-up wrath, with Cecil, with the world. Instead, John endows him with the tool that will save his life, a set of knives surrounding his face. Cecil must match the ugliness of his soul to that of his outside. It's a crudely built trap, with an analogy to match, something we aren't accustomed to from John. Considering it's his first trap, I'm willing to give it a pass, especially considering the entire thing breaks, as Cecil falls to the ground. When he gets to his feet, he tries to attack John, who gives him the old olé, and he falls into a pile of barbed wire. And then it clicks for Strom. 4 walls build a home. The newspaper article of John and Art. The Gideon meatpacking plant. That's where he'll find Rig. Just in time too, as Rig enters and finds another note that says, "Patience. Remember who you are saving. Time is on your side." Matthews, Hoffman, and Blank all look into the rafters, seeing the mechanics of the trap, and deducing that it'll trip if someone walks through the door Art had armed earlier. Strom arrives at the meatpacking plant, calling for backup, but not waiting for them to arrive. Rig enters the final hallway. Jigsaw's final messages to him painted along the walls. He finds the IDs of both Matthews and Hoffman. Has he learned how to truly save a life? As time runs low, Art takes off his coat to expose a metal device running down his spine. He's not running this game. He's playing his own. He was the one that survived the Mausoleum game from the beginning, and was rewarded with an envelope to set up his next trial. Then we see Jeff Denlin roam the halls, and as he hits a light fixture, Strom turns around. We see Jeff enter the main workshop again, and we hear Amanda's voice. Strom is right behind him now. We see Lynn get shot, this time from outside the makeshift operating room. And that's when it hits. Everything in this film has been happening simultaneously to Saw 3. John wasn't conducting this game from the grave. He's getting brain surgery, and watching his accomplice burn his empire to the ground. Finally, Rig reaches the door. He hesitates, but runs in with mere seconds to spare, breaking the door. Art charges at Rig, who shoots him almost out of instinct. The trap springs, and the ice blocks above Matthews swing down, convening right on Matthews' skull, killing him instantly. As his body falls off the ice block, the remaining weight of Hoffman tips the scale to his side, with the water rushing over as well to shock him. Strom enters the operating room using a key he received at the beginning, where he finds Jeff in the aftermath of killing John with the circular saw. Jeff had just found out about his daughter's kidnapping, so he's rightfully on edge, and goes to shoot Strom. But if you recall from the previous film, he didn't have enough bullets for John, so he certainly doesn't have enough for Strom. Not that he'd get the chance to use them, as Strom bombards him with a shower of lead. And it's only then that Strom finds the remains of Jigsaw and his apprentice Amanda. Rig and Art lay on the ground, writhing in pain. Rig still had more time on the clock. He should have won. Art tells him that Jigsaw was testing him, and as he reaches into his bag, Rig shoots him through the head. But Art wasn't reaching for a weapon to attack Rig, but rather for another tape. Jigsaw's final tape for Rig says that reaching Matthews and Hoffman in under 90 minutes has resulted in their deaths. He was told the rules. He was never supposed to save anyone. Throughout his tests, he was to learn that the subjects must save themselves.
You know never to go through an unsecured door, ever.
And then Hoffman approaches Rig. Hoffman was the secret accomplice to Jigsaw and Amanda Young. We see all of the victims of previous games that were kidnapped by Hoffman. As Rig falls flat, bleeding out, Hoffman delivers the most jaw-dropping game over in the series thus far. He exits the room, shutting the door on Strom, locking him in the guerrilla operation room. Jigsaw's message for Hoffman at the beginning wasn't indicative of him putting Hoffman through a game, but making sure his legacy lives on, through Hoffman.
Game over.
A big part of this movie revolves around questions, both asking and answering, and it means that every movie in the series is now tied together. By now, we have most, if not all of our questions answered, but now this film asks more, and leaves some open-ended. We finally see why John covered a tape and wax in the last film. We see further reference to the letter Amanda reads, but we don't get an answer as to what Hoffman wrote. It becomes a bit of a whodunit affair before Hoffman's reveal, since from the very jump, we're told that Jigsaw and Amanda must have a third person. And the police and us as the audience spend the next 80-something minutes piecing together who that may be. Saw 4 works better as a tragic epilogue for the first 3 films, rather than a true fourth entry. And for me, I think it works pretty well. It's an epilogue, and lead into the next films, tying up most of the loose ends that the franchise had, while leading into a new trilogy. It's much faster paced, and the police procedural stuff makes a grand return after taking a noticeable absence in the previous film. Oddly enough, I think that aspect was the highlight in this one. Some of my favorite characters in the franchise are introduced and highlighted here, namely Rig, Strom, and Hoffman. Lyric Ben as Lieutenant Rig absolutely killed it for me. He stole the show, even over the always superb Tobin Bell. Personally, I think he ends up being the protagonist who deserves to be tested the least. His main thing is that he's too caught up in saving lives, that it's affecting his own, and in the end, that was his undoing. It's an absolutely heartbreaking end to his character. He gave off a great sense of tension, confliction, and animosity that propelled the film in every scene he was in. He's the antithesis of Jeff's character. While Jeff had personal reasons for his actions, it ultimately became predictable over time that he would meander around and do nothing but cry over flashbacks until the last moments to try and save someone. With Rig, it's different. He rushes into everything. You know he wants to save everyone, which, on paper, would seem even more predictable than Jeff, but it never feels as much. Everything is designed around the fact that Rig can't stop himself from saving people. And it's a lot more interesting to see the potential consequences for his actions, and whether or not Jigsaw can change them. Strom is a surprisingly great character to me, especially considering how a lot of fans have shown their distaste for him. He's like an amalgamation of every stereotypical cop character from every TV show. His rough demeanor, the by-the-book, no-nonsense approach. It's so funny to me that he dismisses his colleagues' ideas about the murders, and runs with his own idea, which we find out soon after to be completely incorrect. It makes him an easy character to hate. On the surface, at least. Under that grisly exterior is a man who cares so deeply. And the catalyst for showing this is his response to Perez getting Billy bombed. Calling her mother to tell her what happened to her daughter. The outburst. The increased pressure on Jill Tuck in the interrogation room. It's such a small aspect of his character, and will be glossed over by most watching, but the raw emotion exuded by Strom is hard for me to ignore. And then we reach Hoffman, our now revealed heir to the Jigsaw throne. He's always been a bit of a suspicious character, but you just kind of forget about his weird remarks. And that's where he gets you. Rigg discounted what he thought to be innocuous commands from Hoffman, and in the end, he paid for it. Knowing what Hoffman becomes, particularly in later installments, is such a joy to see, and I actually enjoy him being the new Jigsaw, per se. Overall, Saw 4 is a very worthy installment in the series, even if it lacks the thematic depth of the first three. It's essentially a cat and mouse game with many moving parts. It gives us time to meet and understand characters, enough for us to care about their decisions. I do think that this is the weakest thus far, but not a bad entry in the slightest. More of the perfect bridge between what we already know and what's to come. Thank you for watching.